In this video, we're going to go over some basic editing features in Pro Tools. First, let's make these tracks a little bit bigger. Hold Alt and click right at the bottom of any track. Perfect. This looks much better. The first thing we should look at is we should make sure we know our start and end points of our track. So, because this song has a basic instrumental at the end of it, I can just look at it. I'll scroll to the bottom, and then you can see this is the main track. Stops right at 55. All right, cool. So a big thing that people use when you're editing something like a song is loop playback. This is helpful when you need to hear something over and over and over again. I normally have my playback already set in loop playback, but if you don't, press Control and then click the play button, and you're in loop playback mode. To loop something, all you have to do is make sure that you have your timeline selected, and then you make a selection of what you want to loop. When you're doing this, you almost always want to be in grid mode, because then you'll have a perfect loop and nothing will sound out of whack. So, I'm just going to loop the chorus.
Roll of the thunder or the oceans roar, but I just can't hear what you say anymore. And it keeps rolling through my head oh, even if you scream. Roll of the thunder or the oceans roar.
So as you can see, as this goes through, I can sort of make changes and do whatever I need to the track.
My head oh, even if you scream. Roll of the thunder or the oceans roar, but I just can't hear what you say anymore, and it keeps rolling through my head oh, even if you.
As you can see, you can sort of step through the track the way you want to. You can look at tracks in solo mode and just go over each individual part to make sure if you heard something wrong, you can go through and basically make a checklist of this track's fine, this track's fine, that track's fine, and figure out which one isn't fine. This also works if you're making a mix of sorts. Now let's look at how edit modes take an effect in this. Because the song is already set to a beat and bar, using grid mode allows you to easily make sure you can edit files and make sure you cut off the end of something and make sure that you don't have any artifacts that you don't need. So when I'm editing this, if I want to get closer, I can change the grid and I can edit even closer. If I want to change something else, like let's say make some more specific edits and edit right up to where I see this starting, I could use slip mode and scroll casually. Generally speaking, you're not going to want to do this with something like shuffle mode, because if I were to use shuffle mode, it would move it forward and the tracks would no longer be in sync for the doubles. In the case of spot mode, I can click this file and say, hey, I want to move this a few bars over. This would be good to use in the case that you were either moving something that was recorded in the wrong spot, or if you're recording separate takes for something like an ad-lib track, and you know exactly your start and stop points of your chorus and you want to move an ad-lib to a specific chorus and or section, you can move it that way. One of your main commands is going to be Command E. That's separate at selection. This allows you to not have to copy and paste tracks and just easily select it, and then you can move it in whatever format you want to. I'm going to move back to grid mode. Another editing command that you might want is Command C, which is copy. This is the standard copy that you'd have anywhere else. Just remember that wherever your selection is set is where this will paste. If your edit selection and track are not linked together, this can paste elsewhere. So, in this case, if I were to do this, it's not going to paste on the selected track, it's going to paste on the selected insertion point. Now let's talk about editing regions, which are now called clips. You can trim the clip as long as you have your Smart tool selected or your Trim tool selected by going to the far left or right corner and moving it. It's just as simple as that. Right now I have layer mode on, so this track won't end until this track actually starts. That's why there's a small shadow right here. It also allows if I were to have something else here and I were to move this, nothing would be lost. Now let's talk about fades. Fades are important for an array of reasons. One, because they can allow things to sound more natural, and two, in the case that you had a bunch of takes that you needed to splice together, you're going to need this to make sure that you can even out the sound in between. One, if you had dead air that you're keeping within the session to make sure it sounds natural, it's the only way it's going to work. Let's look at the last chorus.
It's like the roll of the thunder, thunder, and it's the ocean's roar, and it keeps rolling through my head, my head.
So as you heard that, there were two different breath sets that were right there. So if we zoom in a little bit, we can actually look at it. So there's multiple things I could do in this situation. I can make my grid even tighter and actually just crossfade it by going right in between at the bottom and then moving a fade there. If I double click this fade, I can choose what happens. I can make it completely transparent together. I can make it an overlapping fade. I can make it a uniform fade, or I can change the actual curve of it. But in this case, I'm actually not going to crossfade it. So I'm just going to press delete, and it won't actually change the waveforms, but what it will do is it'll delete that fade file. So I'm going to delete part of both of these regions. And then I'm going to go to the top right corner of the first clip and do a fade out. On the second, I'm going to do a fade in. So it should sound like this.
And it keeps rolling through my head, my head.
That was a much smoother transition. If you want to do batch fades like this, you can zoom out and you can double click entire rows and press Command F. Here you can change all of your fade properties from fade in to crossfading to fading out. You can also change how short the fade is or how long it needs to be. You can choose if you want to change your existing fades or if you only want to create new fades. Only do this if you know exactly what you want to change. Now let's look at undoing mistakes that you might have made. Because this is a session that I'm still working on, I'm probably not going to use any of the edits that I've made during this video. But let's say that I wanted something, but then I played through and then I accidentally made a different selection. One of Pro Tools' fun features is by pressing Command-Alt-Z, I can restore my last selection. Also, if you can't remember that, just remember, go to Edit and then Restore Last Selection. Other than standard undo functions, if you want to have an actual undo history, go to Window and then look for your undo history. With this little triangle, just like every other one, you have more options. You can look at when you made it, and you can also undo all of them or just clear the entire queue. The biggest undo of them all is File, Revert to Saved. This is going to get rid of all the changes that you've made, but your backup will still be present. And here we are at the original session again. And those are your basic editing techniques in Pro Tools 12.